This video is going to be talking through some of the difficulties that Claudius faced in his accession. We have a nice variety of sources here. So we have a section of Suetonius, a section of Josephus, some Cassius Dio, and also a coin. So a major thing we need to be aware of when we're looking at the sources to do with Claudius is some of the problems with the authors. So particularly authors like Suetonius, Tacitus and Cassius Dio are all from a senatorial background. Now, because Claudius puts in a lot of administrative changes, which were in practice quite sensible, these administrative changes took a lot of day-to-day running of the state away from the Senate, and he gave them to his freedmen instead, and his slaves, because he thought they were more efficient. And generally they did do a better job. Now, because of this, obviously anyone from a senatorial background lost a bit of their influence on the government of Rome, and that made Claudius quite unpopular with certain members of the Senate. This also makes him quite unpopular with the source authors. So when we're looking at any of these key authors, particularly said Suetonius, Cassius Dio and Tacitus, on Claudius, we always have to keep in mind that on some topics, in particular later on videos, they are hugely critical. There are also slight variations of the story of his accession. So just to keep in mind what we've done previously, so obviously Caligula was murdered by a section of the Praetorian Guard, not the whole of the Praetorian Guard, for, well, just being Caligula. And there is quite a lot of confusion surrounding that day, understandably, after Caligula's assassination. So this is the difficulty that Claudius has. Now, to give you a little bit of background on Claudius himself, he is older when he comes to the throne. I know it's not particularly helpful. I think he was in his 50s. I might be slightly wrong about this. He's kind of the forgotten member of the dynasty. This is partly because he was slightly disabled. We're not entirely sure what was wrong with him. Some historians think that maybe he had a form of cerebral palsy. What we do know is he tended to walk with a limp, and he sometimes dribbled quite a lot, and he had a slight issue with his speech. Not that it's particularly an issue, but it does mean that he is overlooked as a result of it. It does appear to be a very mild form of some kind of physical disability. Claudius was quite happy to be ignored. He was generally quite a quiet guy. He was an academic, so he really enjoyed studying, and he wrote a huge amount of books, and he was particularly interested in history. So, yeah, a good person. So he wasn't expecting ever to become emperor. He was the forgotten guy in the corner, in his library, reading books. It's the last thing he particularly expected. And as I'm looking at the source, when I said, I think he was about 50, Suetonius literally says in the first sentence, Claudius emperor at the age of 50. So clearly I wasn't looking. So, anyway, that gives you a little bit of an idea about his character, and that's obviously one of the things we have to look at in terms of his character, is whether or not he sort of really wanted to be emperor, and whether or not he was particularly controlled by others around him. That's the key thing with Claudius. So, as he says, he becomes emperor quite late in life, and it's all to do with after the assassination of Caligula. So he sort of hears about the assassination, because, it's obvious, and he slips away in fear. So he's worried that he is basically going to be assassinated as well. And the famous story is, as it says in Suetonius, it says he hid behind a door curtain, so he was found behind the curtains. There's a TV series in the, I'll say 70s, might be 80s, called I, Claudius, which is based around these particular events of the dueling Claudian dynasty, and it's quite a famous scene where he's found hiding behind a curtain. So there's a guardsman, he's wandering through, so he's kind of like one of those toddlers who can't hide properly, so he's hiding behind a curtain but his legs are sticking out. So obviously they spot him, and Claudius drops to the floor, clasps the soldier's knees, thinking he's about to be killed, and he's obviously begging, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. But instead, the guardsman acclaims him emperor, which obviously would have taken Claudius a little bit by surprise. And this is because there's a division within the Praetorian Guard. There's some members of the Guard who kind of were hoping for the Republic to be restored and get rid of the emperors, and then there's the other half who kind of want a new emperor that they can kind of control. So this guy happens to fall into that particular camp. So they surround him with some guards and they take him to the Praetorian camp. Understandably, Claudius is very scared, because why would you not be? The previous emperor has literally just been murdered. This is, 30 minutes later, if even that. So he's in the camp and he's being guarded, so that there's no immediate danger. So he's feeling a little bit happier, but he is aware that the consuls, with the approval of the Senate and the aided city cohorts, had seized the forum, and capital, and were determined to maintain public liberty. So there is this moment where the Senate sort of might take its opportunity to basically get its power back and to get rid of the autocratic leaders, to get rid of the emperors. And the consuls appear to be on their side. So Claudius is under the protection of the Praetorian Guard, so he's safe, but obviously the Senate seems to be acting against him. So then the tribunes summon him to the Senate house, and then they tell him what's going on. And Claudius replies that he can't come because he is being held captive. Which is kind of half true, because he was seized by the Praetorian Guard and taken to their camp. So the Senate, however, was dilatory in putting its plan into action. I think that means, keen. Because everybody's kind of going, what's going to happen. So they think, right, we've got to do something about it. So at the same time, of the Senate kind of going, we need to do something, we need to get rid of the emperors, the people, so the plebs, surround the building and demand a monarchy, expressly calling for Claudius. So the people throw themselves behind Claudius instead. Remember, the people were really unhappy when Caligula was murdered. They know that it wasn't Claudius's fault, so they benefit from the emperors, or they feel like they benefit from the emperors because they give them food, and games, etc. So Claudius then allows the guards to acclaim him emperor and to swear allegiance, and he also promises every man 150 gold pieces, which made him the first of the Caesars to purchase the loyalty of his troops. See, now, I don't think that's entirely true. We know history. We know that Julius Caesar often gave lots of money to his troops. We know that Augustus gave money to his troops. Maybe it's probably the most explicit example of this happening, but I don't think he's the first person to do this. Let's be honest. So anyway, I'm just criticising Suetonius because why not? So Claudius' palace has now been established, so he is now safe. So in the video we watched in lesson to do with Caligula's assassination, the Mary Beard pointed out that if you have the Praetorian Guard behind you, there's not much anyone else can do. This is an example of this. So because Claudius has the majority of the Praetorian Guard behind him, the Senate can't act, the plebs support him, they're not going to get rid of the monarchy, so now they have the new emperor and Claudius is now safe. Or seemingly safe anyway. So he comes to power and he basically has to sort of figure out what he's going to do with his legacy of Caligula and also technically Tiberius, of all these sort of, treason trials and assassinations and all the rest of it. So he gave priority to the task of obliterating all records of those 2 days where they've been talking of changing the form of government. So anything that the Senate has written down and discussed and debated is gotten rid of. He orders a general amnesty and forgetfulness of what had happened, so it just doesn't happen. None of it happened. And he executes a few colonels and centurions who had conspired against Gaius. Because he's got to show that, they did assassinate the emperor. They've got to do something about it. But he doesn't do a wide purge. He isn't like Caligula, really. He's not that kind of character. So he picks his key people that need to be killed off, but the rest of them, they just weren't involved, in inverted commas. He left them be. So it's quite clemency kind of attitude. So then he starts using by Augustus as the most sacred and frequent oath, also harking back to Augustan times, and made the Senate decree his grandmother Livia divine honours. So again, he's sort of pushing forward probably this idea he's very similar to Augustus, and he is the standard they should all be living up to, and kind of trying to draw a line after Tiberius and Caligula. So he also keeps the fame, so he keeps talking about Germanicus, who, remember, we said was a fantastic guy when we did Germanicus the first time. So he keeps kind of saying, oh look, I'm the brother of Germanicus, isn't he wonderful? And he also proclaims he begged people to celebrate my father Drusus' birthday, who was the other brother who was very successful. He completes a marble arch in honour of Tiberius, so he's also promoting him and he's finishing the work that had been started by Gaius but kind of neglected because Gaius lost interest. And he annulled all of Gaius's edicts and would not allow the day of his assassination to be proclaimed a public festival. So, like I said, a bit of a clean slate. Let's just start fresh. Let's just not do these massive purges, which is what this section of Josephus is going to basically repeat itself. So there's investigation to the murder of the emperor. The plebs are really wanting to know what really happened. The Senate don't really care because they will remember hoping to possibly get rid of the emperors in the first place. And the people were really angry about the situation, the fact the murder of the emperor had not been detected. So they're pushing for sort of justice to occur. The consuls then publish a decree containing denunciations of Gaius, so they start to criticise Caligula. They kind of break up the crowds, which is what's mentioned in here, particularly to do with the people and the soldiers. And people are still really unhappy. And they're really worried that if there's these big crowds that there would be sort of looting and pillaging, etc., and the city will sort of tear itself apart. So they have to do something about it, but they're not quite sure what to do. So I don't know why I didn't highlight this sentence. I'll highlight it while we're here. So we have the Senate assembles in response to the urgency of the situation. So the Senate comes together and with this idea of what they're going to do about this assassination of Gaius, and they're full of confidence because they've thought they would now be in control of government business. So this is all happening, I should point out, before Claudius is proclaimed emperor. So this version of what Josephus is talking about goes with this bit here. So this is kind of happening at the same time. If it was a soap, you'd have like a split screen of like, and at the same time. I've lost my place. Where are we? Here we go. Right, so Claudius is unexpectedly kidnapped from his house. We know that by the Praetorian Guard. And the Praetorian Guard realized the Republican government was incapable of controlling a vast empire. Yeah, probably true. We looked at the fall of the Republic, and yeah, it wasn't capable of doing it, hence why they had Augustus in the first place. And more importantly, though, they realized that if the Republican government's brought back in, it would not be in the interests of the army. So they kind of think if they throw our support behind an emperor, obviously he will favour us, and then we will be in a better position. So it seemed best for them to choose Claudius as emperor. I was right earlier, uncle. Couldn't remember the relation. I was having a half guess. So he's related to, obviously, within the family, and they also know that he has this great family background because he's directly related to Augustus as it being his grandson or great grandson, I can't remember, on one side, and that he's obviously very intelligent and he's very studious. So they made him emperor who'd be likely to feel a debt towards them and repay them with gifts. Okay, so they kidnap him. So at daybreak, the conspirators try and talk to the soldiers. Sorry, I'll highlight that whole sentence. But then they kind of realise that they have lost their support and that everyone there was determined to be ruled by one man. And as a result of all this, because the Senate is unable to act quickly enough, they are reduced to impotence. They can't control the crowd. They can't reach a decision on the choice of emperor. So they have no say on what happens. It's all in the power of the army. So the main plotter is really angry about this particular situation. Sorry, I'm just rereading some of the sentence. He says, I'll give him someone else, and kind of ends up kind of having a bit of a rant. You've been ruled by a madman. So that's a nice quote about Gaius. And you're going to give the empire to a lunatic. Obviously, Claudius is fine. There's nothing wrong with him. But obviously, as I said, he was seen as being quite weak. So that's probably the point that this guy's making. But soldiers refuse to take any of his words, and they decide to join Claudius. So the Senate has no army. Consuls reduced to ordinary citizens because they've got no power. As a result of it, essentially, Claudius is picked. So Sabinius, one of the assassins, stepped in the middle and threatened to kill himself rather than help Claudius emperor and see the slaves take over the government once again. It doesn't make any difference. Claudius is then made emperor. So again, we said previously, obviously having the army behind him has ensured, it's one, kept him safe and ensured his position, and the Senate again loses its power. So then Cassius Dio talks about the aftermath of all of this. So he accepts all honours voted to him except Father of the Fatherland. He, again, kind of like Tiberius, probably not to the same extent. He doesn't appear in the Senate straight away, but until the 30th day, sorry. Partly because he didn't feel particularly confident. He was aware that the Senate probably wanted to get rid of him, but obviously that the army had chosen him. So he exercised great caution in everything. Understandable. He made all who came into presence men alike undergo search to see if they were unarmed. Again, kind of understandable after considering what happened to Caligula. So then Claudius has the plotters put to death. And though he sort of seems quite happy, according to Cassius Dio, he's happy about Gaius' murder. I'm not sure he was. He didn't really want to be emperor. He was quite happy reading books. He has to kind of make sure he's kept safe. So he acted not so much as the avenger of Gaius, but rather as if he caught Coro plotting against himself. So the idea that, you know, this is the plots against the emperorship, not against one individual person, and that's why they have to be executed. As for the others who had openly canvassed for a return to democracy, he actually bestows honours and offices upon them. So he acts in a very he uses clemency, basically. I couldn't think of the right word for it then. He promised them immunity, and actually carries out his promise. So unlike Gaius, who remember at the beginning of his reign sort of said, oh yes, the treason trials are over, I've burned all the papers, and then within a year, oh look at all the papers, I'm going to kill you all again. Claudius actually keeps his promise. So, you know, I will give you honours and titles, blah 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 blah, and he doesn't go back on it. He also abolishes the treason trials, so the charge of Maestus. He doesn't punish anyone who's charged for offences committed in the past or in the future. And it really importantly, he doesn't bring anybody to trial on a fabricated charge. So we have here sort of law and order being restored, which is good. We have the end of treason trials and the mass killings of political opposition, which is good. So we have this kind of return to stability. There's quite a lot of echoes in what Claudius does, which Augustus also did. Because remember, obviously, Augustus post prescriptions under the Second Triumvirate, when Augustus comes into power properly after the Battle of Actium, he doesn't go around killing his opposition either. So there is quite Augustus-like behaviour going on here around this kind of amnesty and clemency. And then a coin is also published around this time, showing that Claudius's relationship with the army, so clasping in the hand of a long-haired soldier with shield and legendary eagle. So the fact that the Praetorians in particular, the Praetorian Guard, are the ones who he supports because they supported him. So they were kind of, I suppose, right to throw their support behind him because they have more power as a result of it. And Claudius, therefore, is now secure in his position as emperor.